All right, we are. I've been kind of playing around with some recording options here throughout the day. We're going to try one option right now and see how it works. I don't know how it's going to work. We're going to. It's recording now, so we're going to see what happens. I'll post whatever garbage comes out the other end, I guess, once we get there. But it should be hopefully working the same as what we had before. A little bit different program, so I'm not sure on quality or anything like that. Not that I sat there and watched the other videos either, so unfortunately probably just as boring as the other ones, so sorry about that. But let's talk about strings because, yeah, we should be kind of putting it all together here. We had a whole lot of activities, I think 13 or 14 of them, that we did in class where we tried to basically introduce all of these different methods and then start smushing them together, okay? And that's really what it comes down to here is I'm not telling you which methods to apply. You have to decide which ones it is you are going to have to do in order to get this done. So with this one here, prompt the user for a sentence and display the number of vowels in the sentence. Basically, as you do this, once again, this is something that I keep going back to, and you're going to hear it over and over and over again, is just this idea to stop doing your problem solving inside of Java. Too many of you are inside of Eclipse typing string Bob equals da 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 da, and you're trying to go ahead and code and go, I wonder what Bob should do next. That's not where you need to be. You need to basically do this and say, okay, we're going to go ahead and ask for a string. There you go. Now we need to figure out how many vowels are in here. And I look at this and I go, 3. And that's great. But now we have to go, how on earth did we do this? And how do I go ahead and get a process for getting that done that's repeatable inside of our computer? This one really comes down to is I'm going to look at the first letter and I'm going to say, hey, are you a vowel? If we are, we're going to add one to a counter. If not, we just got to keep moving along. And we do it for the second one and the third one and the fourth one. Doesn't matter if we go ahead and check the space. Wouldn't matter if there is some kind of weird punctuation or something like that in here.
Would it matter if you didn't put the L in world?
Would it matter if I didn't put the yet? I want to say hello word.
I'm so confused with what?
Now that he caught my spelling error.
Oh my god.
Oh wait, that was an error.
I thought that was, well, it's not Word, it's actually PowerPoint.
There you go. I like it.
I'm
So,
so confused.
don't worry about it.
I concur.
It did make sense. It was a pretty good joke. So, anyhow, he's like a future math computer science teacher. That's what the level of joke it was. But, okay.
Oh.
So when we go through here, we're just looking at letter after letter after letter after letter. So now that we have a process going on for this, not all that big of a deal, we're going to go ahead and say, how do we grab a letter? And this is where we go basically to our methods and say, charav will go ahead and give me one of the letters that I have. I already know how to cycle through the length of my string. And then once we go ahead and we compare this here, now we're going to have some kind of decision structure to go ahead and compare it to each and every one of these. Now there are some easier ways and some more difficult ways to go ahead and get this done. But once again, now I'm ready for Eclipse. Now I'm ready to go ahead and prompt for a string to run through the letters and then go try and count them up. Now I have a game plan. Until we reach this point, you've got no business playing around in Eclipse. You're only going to get yourself more confused, okay? So please, please, please work on this strategy. Make this a part of everything you do. Even really simple programs like basically this one here, we are going to go ahead and think it through before we get into Eclipse. That way, when we go ahead and we start looking at this, we can do this however we like. Now, in this case here, I basically just did a nice little switch statement. Most of you probably did a whole bunch of ifs, all right? That's perfectly acceptable as well. This is just kind of a nice little tricky way to go ahead and get the same thing done. I'm going to basically pull that character at whatever letter I'm on. I'm going to compare it to any one of these. If it matches up, we're going to actually go down to the bottom and we're going to add 1 to my vowel counter. If it's any other character there, it's going to kick out. Okay?
Use product for this one, but could you use contains?
If you use contains, it's only going to tell you if there's one of them there. So if we read, what? Right. So contains, the way that it works is it will let you know if it's in there, but it will only tell you if, it won't tell you how many times it's in there. It'll just say, yep, it's in there. So that's where we get a little bit sketchy on that one. If we were now some problems, if we were guaranteed that none of these letters would repeat, you'd be right on the right track, okay? But because I didn't really put that forth here, okay, I probably have to use a little different one. Nisha?
So if I use a bunch of like if statements, but like if I'm doing care or tar add or whatever,
Yep.
in the parentheses, do I put double quotes around like A, E, I, or U, Y?
When you do those, you're going to have to use single quotes because Charat brings me back a character.
Oh.
So this is a really good question for everybody, okay? She's asking this question of, if I'm dealing with strings, can I do this? And the answer is no, okay? We cannot compare strings using our double equal sign. That is comparing where they are in space inside of our computer. Instead, we would have to use the dot equals. But this guy right here is actually bringing back a character value. So that character value is, if you can think about it, something in single quotes. So that's a really important part that she brings up here is we do not use the double equals for strings. Okay?
I can put whatever letter in the double quotes and it'll find it and it'll add to my vowels. No.
You can put whatever character inside of our single quotes, yes. If we're going to use these guys and we use our single quotes, yes. Yep. So you could have a bunch of if statements. If it's A, add one. If it's E, add one.
Double equals, you know.
The double equals we can with just our primitive data types here. We can't do it with our strings though.
Primitive data types is like the integer double.
Yep.
So not double.
Doubles, yep. Yep. So when we say primitive, it's the non-object types. The dot equals will compare the guts of your string. Okay? All right, not so bad. All right, prompt the user for a sentence. Yep, we can do that. All right, display each word of the sentence on a separate line. Display how many words are in the sentence. Repeat until the user chooses to quit. Ugh. Well, we got a lot of stuff to do here. So, we'll even put the L in here this time. Okay? So, when we go ahead and we start doing this, when we start our output, obviously we've got hello on one line, we've got world on the next line. Life is pretty good. Okay? Now, how am I going to find the difference in my words? How do I find one word versus another word? Good, my space character. Okay? So, right here, that space character is basically what I want to look for. Now, this program here can be done a whole lot of different ways. And we even taught you kind of some tricks inside of our class in terms of how we can go ahead and get this done. We know that the number of spaces is actually going to equal the number of words we have, almost. Plus one, very good, okay? So when we look at this, how many words are in the sentence, all I have to do is count my spaces and then add one to it to go ahead and get that done. I'm going to be looking for those spaces anyhow, so I know when to go ahead and get down to the next line. And then basically what we would do is, yeah, we'd put a big loop around this whole thing. All right? And once again, I am not worried about this guy, okay, until I get it to work once. Please do not start by saying, while blah. What are you doing? You didn't get the process to work yet. Get the process to work for one string, get it done, then worry about repeating this. Now, we could do this a couple different ways. We could go ahead and start looking at substrings. We can have the ability to go ahead and take a substring, rip it off, go to the next one, rip off the next word, do the next one, rip off the next word. So substring is a way that I can go ahead and I can look for spaces, and we can go ahead and find those and start hacking this thing up. Another way that you could go about this is actually looking at what we did before, actually in our previous problem, and that was, what if we just tackle this letter by letter by letter? Okay? So when we look at hello written here, it doesn't have to be the word hello that you wrote to the screen. You could have written an H. Come on. Uh-oh. There we go. Could have written an H and E and L and L and O. Once I hit a space, now I know to kick to the next line. Okay? So we could go back and instead of the whole substring thing here, we could have hacked it up letter by letter if I wanted to simplify it like that. Yes, Leanne?
How would you for substrings? How would you do that? Because like, you would know like the index from the top.
Oh. So we can actually go ahead and ask for the index of a space.
Okay, so
That's like two.
Well,
how do you ask for
there's a method that says index up, and you can send it a space, and it will give it right back to you.
Like,
Okay.
speaking of the first one,
What?
you can also do a combination, like if you compare something by letter to space, that lets us see the end value of the.
Very good. Yep.
This count spaces thing. Can you do like a care ask and then like space? Do you put that in single quotes then?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's space is still a character.
Yep.
Okay, and then you would. Okay, got it.
Okay. So, this one right here, what I'm doing is I am very simply just going to go through this thing and I am going to go ahead and display this thing letter by letter. So, in this case here, I happen to have, let's grab this. We've got our for loop here in the middle, okay, and once again, I'm not worried about the outside do while loop, doesn't make any difference to me right now. I'm just going to start off here, let's go ahead and input a string. I've got my word count starting at 1, okay, so this is my +1 added on to my number of spaces. I'm going to go loop through every single character inside of my string, okay. If this guy happens to be a space, all right, I'm going to go add 1 to word count and kick myself to the next line for displaying. Otherwise, I'm just going to display that letter. So in this case here, my solution is going to write out the H, write out the E, write out the L, write out the L, write out the O. Now I hit a space, that basically kicks me to the next line because I've got a system out print line. I'm not printing anything else out, but going to my next line so I can keep going character by character by character through this. Okay? But I did it with characters. No strings. Yep.
Like in the last vowels, you could have done double because that's a character.
As long as it was a character, yes. And that was what Nisha was saying, was double quotes or single quotes. Single quotes if you're going to use the two equal signs.
And because double quotes is not a thing then.
Double quotes is a string. We have to use dot equals to do that. So, once I get this working, okay, and not until this works correctly, do I worry about doing this whole looping thing and kicking myself back around. There is no reason to do that, okay? So please, 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 get your logic right first, and then we go from there. If you want to look at the substring example here, this is our substring example. We can do this still. Both of these solutions can be changed around and modified and whatever. But in this case here, I'm going to basically take my string. I'm going to start copying at the very beginning, and I'm going to rip off the first word. The first word starts at element 0, and it ends at that space. Remember, we did not include that space, but I'm simply going to output that to the screen. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to rip that string, that word, off of my original string. Now, once again, a bit more complicated than going letter by letter, okay? But basically, we're going to have here, we've got hello world going on. All right. When we go ahead and we take that first substring, this is my first substring. That gets displayed to the screen. All right. Then I'm going to go ahead and reassign this thing. So in my example right here, I had str1. That's what this thing was equal to. Once I do my next substring right here, once I go ahead and we go ahead and chop that down, I'm simply going to be left with world inside of this guy. And then I can go ahead and grab the next word with the same idea. Now, this has a little bit of a trick here in, once I only have one word left here, I don't have any more spaces. Which means my very, very last word, I'm going to go ahead and output right here. Once again, this solution, while nice and logical, pretty ugly, okay? Pretty complicated from a method call standpoint. This guy right here, going letter by letter by letter by letter, seems to be a whole lot easier, okay? And once again, it's completely 100% up to you which way you do this, because both of these guys are going to be fun.
In the one that you have up later, I thought you said you can't change like strings.
Nope, I'm not changing. What I'm doing is I'm throwing away the old one and I'm assigning that object variable a new string. So this guy right here died. Oops, that did not work at all.
That also died.
That also completely died. This guy right here, all right, this is my object variable. So if you can imagine, this is referencing a string object here. It just died, and this is the new string that I gave it.
So you don't have to say like string in front of it again?
Nope, because the object variable is already created. I'm just assigning it a new value.
Oh, I thought you were saying
Nope, object variables I can.
What's the new?
But you are absolutely right. I cannot change hello world as a string object, but I can throw it away and I can assign that object variable a new value.
automatically throw it away when you assign it?
Yep. One last one, Nisha. Yep.
On the bottom of the while,
Yep.
is it like you know, just right, like, isn't it compared to ignore? I'm confused what equal and ignore is. Is that just the same thing?
Ooh, yeah, you're right. That should be compared to it.
But is that why you
I don't even know why we have. It should just be equal.
Yeah, why you
I don't know. So I really like what you're saying right here, because according to this, I mean, really we have this issue if the user types like capital Y, yes, okay? So we have some issues there if we want to try and take care of it. That's what I was going to do. And I think I changed my mind about halfway through writing that code. So yeah, I would just use it as equals and say, you know what, if you can't type the word yes correctly, you shouldn't use my program anymore anyhow. So
But that's where you double quotes and there's more than one letter.
right. Yep.
So going back to Monasty's question, you said that you can't change the value of a declared string.
Yep.
So if you already declared str1,
Which is an object variable.
yes.
I can change that.
Oh.
I can't change the string object. So the hello world, that is stuck there forever.
Okay.
That is the object. str, I can reference any string I want to at any given time. I can change what it's referenced to.
So what's the difference?
You can change a string variable to the object.
I can change the object variable.
Oh, it makes it a new thing.
Yeah. So that's the first one. Okay, I cannot change that string object at all. No matter what I do, it's always the same. In this case here, my statement down below where I do my substring, I'm literally going to go ahead and create a brand new one, maybe. And inside of this guy, oops, I'm sorry, I only have world left inside of here. And then I'm going to go like this.
Oh. So then by assigning it a new value, you're getting rid of the link to the first string?
Right. So I'm changing what str1 references.
So how would you declare object variable as opposed to like a normal string?
Here's an object. This is my object variable right here. Just like box, rectangle box, reader Bob. Same exact thing. String is a class that generates objects.
I'm still trying. Yeah, me too.
All just object-oriented program. Alright, palindrome. This is a rather interesting one where you could do this a whole lot of different ways. So, when we do this here, we understand what a palindrome is. Words that spelled the same, okay, backwards and forwards, whatever it is. We got a whole bunch of examples here. Alright, we got race car, we've got a whole bunch of them. Okay,
Taco cat.
now,
Okay.
taco cat, okay.
Bob Hall.
So, Bob Hall. not exactly, but when we go ahead and we look at this here now, I mean that's fine. So, whoop, come on. So, as we go ahead and we look at this here, there's a bunch of different ways that you can do this. One way that we can think about here is we can look at characters. We're pretty good at peeling off characters here. Let's take the first and the last character and see if they're the same. If they are the same, good. We move to the next one. The second and the second last one. Third and the third last one. Now, as we get going through this process to the middle, we have two things that are going to happen. Either one, the example that I have right now, I'm going to end up on one single letter. If it's just one single letter, well then, rock and roll, cool, you don't have anything to compare it with. Or, if I happen to have an even number of letters here, then we're going to actually have two things to compare it to. Then we're going to have to go ahead and say, are you two the same? And then they have nothing left to compare. Not bad. Okay? Anybody think of another way that we could do this? This is probably how we would do this if we were just going ahead and thinking about it. This may not be the easiest way to do it.
I have weird logic because like they like divide it in half and see if it's like backwards.
We like a backwards method.
I love that thinking. Is there a stupid method inside of string that's just going to flip it around? No, unfortunately. But great idea. Did somebody write me a method that's going to do exactly what I want it to do? Nope. Okay, but the problem is it's going to be in reverse order still. Okay? I like what Gabe is saying here. What if we cut it in half and do something like that? But I'm going to go actually back to Nisha's suggestion. If we just wrote it backwards and compared it,
Yeah, but you don't know what they type.
no. But could I
Sentence got reverse.
take a character, write it down. Take a character, write it down. Take a character, write it down. Spell it literally backwards and then compare the two strings?
Oh, you do care at the last index.
Yep. So we could actually run this thing backwards and build myself a string out of all the letters that we have. And then we could go ahead and compare what we started and what we ended with.
Wait, I think that's like I don't know what I did.
I think that's what I did.
Start at the last.
You start with
Length
like,
minus one?
minus. Yeah, that's what I did.
Oh, like sentence like that.
So once again, we have to do our problem solving here. If you go into this problem and you are in the weeds and trying to figure out what to do in the middle of all this mess, this is not going to work. Okay? So my example here actually did what Nisha suggested. Let's just go make this thing backwards, and then we can just use a simple dot equals method to go ahead and compare the two. So here I started at str1.length minus 1 all the way back to 0, and I'm just going to go ahead and build a string out of this thing. So logic here looks a little bit ugly in terms of what we're doing, but we're literally going ahead and building a string, and we're going to keep destroying old string objects and just adding another letter to it, adding another letter to it, until I have what I want. Okay? Once again, the logic here is the tough part. That's where you get paid the money. Okay? Once you have that algorithm, now the translation into Java, yeah, we can throw that at just about anybody. And we should be able to get that done.
Like really quick minus 2 and minus 1. Is that because it gives you one more?
Mm-hmm.
So that's to get the last index, you have to minus 1.
Right. Yep. Good, good. Not so bad. I'm not going to worry about this one too much. Yeah.
How can you put like strings as to in the
I can't change an object. I can point an object variable at a different object anytime.
Yeah,
You're entering a new sentence.
Yep.
That's altering string font.
No,
It's immutable.
we're changing. Remember, you have to understand what str1 is.
Oh.
There's str1.
yeah.
So when you go in it again, it draws another line.
Well, it just adds a different box over here. So instead of the first time through, we have this string. Then we go through it again. We're going to build another string.
Oh. And it's fun.
Yep.
You don't need to like make them strings.
Hmm?
So you can only build like a new string, you can't alter it.
Is there a way to like alter it?
We always just build a new one and reassign the object variable to something new.
But isn't it doing the same thing? Like it's still altering it technically. Like you're just changing the
Changing the object variable, not the object. Okay? Alright, now we get into some more interesting ones here. Our password generator. Write a program that generates a 6-character password, prompts the user for 3 words, displays the user's password. Okay. So, as we do this here, we're going to need to get some information from the user, and then we're going to have to basically break this down. So, our password is going to be a string in the end. So, we're going to build this thing a character at a time. So, we're going to go ahead for character number 1. We're going to grab the first character of the first word. So, we're going to have to get in our 3 different strings from the user. Great. Sure. Come on. All right. So, when we go ahead and we look at this here, the first character of the first word, okay, we are pretty good at pulling characters off by now. At least we should be. We've done enough of these things. So we're going to go grab that character. And we can add this to a string. We can just build a string out of it. That's not that big of a deal. The last character of the second word. So we're going to have to figure out how many letters this is, and we're going to have to pull off the right one. Okay? So we got an O going on here. A random character from the third word. Now life gets a little more interesting. We are going to, once again, all these things where we want one letter here, yeah, we're going to be doing a little char at. But in this case here, I need to send char at a random number. Now my random number, biggest thing that I need to worry about here is what are its values? Well, I can always start at 0 because 0 is the very, very first character I can grab. And the biggest character I can grab? Length minus 1. Okay, so I need to somehow appropriately go ahead and generate that random number there. Go get that character. Then we're going to go ahead and get 3 different random digits. Well, we just did random numbers right there. We're just going to choose a random digit between 0 and 9. And we're going to add all this junk together.
between 0 and 9. Oh, that's
Just a digit. Okay? Not so bad. So when we do this here, obviously our first three are basically going to be all different random numbers that we've got. Once again, we just kind of described each of these guys. Now my next integer here, if I want my digits 0 to 9, I'm just going to send it to number 10. And basically what we're going to do, I'm just going ahead and adding these all together. So I'm just going ahead and adding and adding and adding and adding. Once again, you should see that assignment as I'm building a new string every single time I do that.
So we need the next int for the generator. When you do the third.
Oh yeah, that looks a little off there, doesn't it?
What's wrong with that?
I just missed next int. Yep. Good catch.
Can you not do the min minus max?
No, you can do the min minus max thing if you want, okay? So, I guess this is kind of a poor example since I harped on the min minus max thing so much. Alright, if you want to go ahead and plug those in, once again, however you like to do it, as long as you get the right value out of it.
I'll get the 10 cents.
What would 10 give me back? 10 is going to give me 0 to 9. So that'll be a digit.
Oh, okay. Pretty random.
Yep. Alright, last one that we got here is our guidance counselor one. Okay. So when we go ahead and we start doing this stuff, all we're going to have to do is basically go ahead. We've got 4 guidance counselors here, and they're taking up different parts of the alphabet here. Prompt the user for the last names of students in the school. When the user is done inputting student names, display the list of students broken down by guidance counselor. So as we look at this here, this is a process. We're going to do this for multiple students. But basically, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take it in somebody's name. Are we just looking at last names here? Sure. So, sure, we'll take Dr. Hall. Okay, so we're going to read in Dr. Hall's last name, and we're going to go ahead and figure out that he needs to be assigned to Mrs. Smith. So Mrs. Smith, basically, the list of students that she's going to keep track of here, all it's going to be is a big old string. And in this case here, we're going to add that name to it. Now that we can go ahead and this is my process, pull in a name, figure out which guidance counselor it goes to, and add it to the end of the string that they're basically keeping track of. Then we're going to loop that thing back around to go ahead and give us another name, stuff it on the end, add another name.
Wait, you can't alter a string. You can alter it by adding more names.
No.
I created a new one and I reassigned.
Oh, each time.
So, as you go ahead and you go trying to find this thing here, we can do a nice little compare to along the way. That is our way that we can go ahead and do that. If you want to nest these, that's perfectly fine. But once again, all we're going to do is I have created a string for each one of my counselors here, and I take whatever it is and I add on the new name to it. Once again, we should see that as the creation of a new string, and we're reassigning it to the same object variable. So in the end, my object variables are referencing whatever's inside of them. Once again, the logic here, how are we going to figure out where does Dr. Hall go to? We're going to need a string method to do that. Compare to is going to be the way to go. Not so bad. Lots of good questions here. Now, we have spent a considerable amount of time just going through the solutions for these. That means it probably took 4 times as long to actually go ahead and write the code to do these. Unless we didn't do them.
I did mostly.
Why did you make it
Except for this one. I did it all.
Why did I?
Yeah.
In my notebook.
Because then I didn't have to worry about any of the lowercase comparisons. Okay? So, let's see where our brains are at. Because we have another problem to try. Activity number 14. We left one out here for just a little bit of fun. Activity 14, you are going to write for me a brand new class definition for an essay. So now instead of just a main method with some input, some doing some stuff, some output, oh that's right, we did object-oriented programming. Oh that's right, it's not ever going away. So here we go. You are going to go ahead and create the essay class, which will eventually go ahead and construct for us an essay object, or multiple ones if we choose to do that. An essay remembers basically an author's name and the text of the essay. So two major fields that are inside of here. All we have is an author's name. It's going to be in the format first space last. Okay? We will then go ahead and go construct a whole bunch of methods here. We need a default constructor. We need a setter method for the author's name. We don't have to validate anything. A setter method for the text. We don't have to validate anything in this case. It's just a bunch of text. We need to be able to return the author's name in all capital letters. So a getter method, but a little bit of a tweaky kind of getter method here. Instead of just the author's last name, we want to get it in all capital letters. Return the number of characters in the author's first name. Okay, another kind of getter method-ish. Okay, but we're going to go count the number of characters. A predicate method, this is a new term that you're going to see come up over and over and over again. A predicate method is any method that returns true or false. We see these all over the joint. And a lot of times we use this for the idea of, did what you were trying to do work, or was there some kind of an error along the way? But in this case here, our predicate method is going to return, does the author's name contain the letter X? And lastly, a method to return the number of words in the essay. So in this case here, we've got a whole bunch of smaller methods, all that are using all of my string methods that are out there. Alright, let's see what we can do.
How do you make an instance field for a string?
Same way, private string, blah.
You have
Oh,
to
but then
write
you
it,
just-
use it, and then do
Can
it.
someone look at this program what you was clicks? Nothing, right?
Nothing. Nope, we're just writing the definition, and then we'll write a main method for it.
And why does it say
Oh, I forgot her name's Potato Face.
Because you don't
Do you
have a name,
still do like
you need an object variable.
My back in for like a second one.
Author.
I was thinking for 14.
Yep.
Oh, so 14. Why? It's military. This is crazy, Mom.
Not gonna do that. As you're looking at creating your field, once again, private is always how we start our fields. In this case, string is going to be the object variable type, and then you need to give it a name. You're creating string object variables.
I like what you hear Monty's sigh.
He was like, it should help you.
Oh, snap.
Wait, for the first
You
and
just
last
got
name.
outplayed.
But like we set up the current.
Oh,
And the carpets.
what is this conversation anyway? I don't understand. That's what Twitter is so long.
We do first name, second.
Oh, I forgot to parentheses.
Make it
Well, we
one
help
full
clean up
name,
the
and you're gonna have to
carpets,
rip it apart.
And or it's like you can have to use it for your phone name, like when we're writing carpets.
Good question here. You cannot rip the author's name apart in the fields. You get two fields and two fields only. Their full name and the text. So when you need it, you're going to have to rip apart.
What's a text of the essay? Oh, like the font? What's text?
It's an actual essay.
Wait, type the whole essay.
Honestly, you're struggling.
Yeah.
More than I'm struggling.
It's going to be one big ginormous string.
That's not.
Do you name instance fields? I forgot.
Why not?
Wait, okay, so why would I write the actual name?
Oh no. So you just gotta count the number of spaces. One.
Negative.
I already did that.
That's too much time.
Okay, wait.
I'm
Good.
just gonna copy my own. You already had
Do you just make up a name or do you actually text?
My name is Billy Eilish. Well, no, it's Billy Eyelash.
Oh, you don't even have to write anything?
But it says set all this. So
Oh,
should be like,
Billy Eyelash. What about you?
Setter or setting me
What
up.
name do you
oh,
Your default constructor, you
Sarah's
just
already
set it to whatever you want.
Chill.
And then set the name. Right.
Void. Public. Void.
Yeah.
Wait, what are we supposed to do after that? I'll write the name.
What's the syntax for set? For this.
I'm gonna be so wrong. I forgot how to treat your phone.
Yeah, same.
Wow, that kind of
I don't
What
know.
if your office doesn't have
Write
a
it in class, that's what I
Then
said.
don't have a name.
Oh wait, no, it's
I
this
You know that you can make one name as a space as a form of string, right? Are you struggling to say how?
Yes.
I said,
Okay, honesty.
Wait, no, I'm gonna make this X author because then it will make sense in my head.
No, I understand.
Softer.
We can be confused together.
Yeah. So they just write their whole essay in here?
Wait, with double equals or single
For
equals?
methods and lower?
I agree. I, Sarah, I have a question.
You can't read.
What's this? Why did this stop? This stop?
Yeah, it's saying that
string
this,
was not
the one, the object is the name of the.
Ooh, now how did I correct now? Did I spell author wrong?
I don't know.
It looks like author is spelled wrong. I'm confusing strings right now.
what's wrong with
Draw a picture.
Sarah, why wrong?
Why wrong?
I'm like 300% sure I spelled author wrong, but
Because you never compared it up there, you dingus. You inserted it inside the constructor, not outside.
oh,
It's the same put text.
Shut up. What? Never heard that?
Don't do it in your default constructor.
I like otherwise it's all the time.
and I call people dingus potatoes. That's just what I do.
No, it's giving me that error.
You know what? You have no. You cannot do that.
Why
You cannot do that. Because I. Yeah.
Why use essay and essay method?
Oh yes, that was hysterical. The carrot one was pretty good. It was good. It was good.
The carrot cakes.
Oh, okay, so we have a Mr. Test quote and said, how can I call a carrot? So then, you know, like they're like death class or the cashiers and teachers. So then we had Mr. Test dying of a carrot and saying, I guess I can call a carrot.
Oh,
Yep. He died.
you told me that. You said that someone was gonna write and said they. Yeah. That's like actually a group.
Mr. Test was not amused.
I would be amused.
He was amused. Mr. Test is a chill guy. Until Mr.
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Imagine Mr. Test getting mad.
He just like doesn't.
He doesn't, but if he does, we're all screwed because my grade in that class depends on his conscience.
Oh.
You know, I'm chilling at an A right now, so Set text. I spelled text. I spelled text wrong twice. How do you spell text? I spelled text wrong.
So set author name, and then
String
text.
text.
And then
String
stop.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you know you were.
God, text.
On this like drive by me and then he stops and then he waves.
She just needs to do that.
I was like, thank you very much.
It's strange.
Like this morning I was walking in the car and I was like, thank you. Ava, have you looked? Sorry, not Ava. Sarah, have you looked? I did like a quarter. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to like grasp. If what I'm graphing is like what you want me to graph. Like I'm just graphing this shape on my graphing calculator, but I'm like I don't know. Cable.
Oh, you're like programmed to get complicated all of a sudden.
Yeah, I realized you have to write the last name and first name, and I was like, oh.
Wait, wow.
It's like,
Oh yeah.
Did you rip it apart? And
You're wrong.
I'm doing it inside the method.
That's what I'm doing it too.
Yeah.
But like, last
Turn the author's last name.
no, but like when I tried to put the two up,
We were like,
and what
She wanted some help, and that help really.
Wait, what's that one method that gets you the space index?
it will, yeah, let me return one. So it's your method of string.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So it won't let me return it because
Mr. O.
last name was
So you're combining a whole lot of crap.
string
So
last
leave
name
it there.
was
Put
string.
it at the very end.
It does?
This is gonna be like a string, right?
Before you.
Oh, my arm
Period.
hurts.
Future uppercase. Because
Here's your first
you
game.
need a string to uppercase. So this is a substring.
You can make us do
We
it.
want.
You
We're
literally
gonna take whatever that substring is.
waste some time.
and give it to uppercase.
Meghan is a specialist at that.
Yes. What is the method that gives you the space index?
Because author dot to uppercase. There are no parameters for
There you
uppercase.
go.
Sure.
Yeah.
Uppercase says take whatever string
So
you're
now I
going
have to make.
to. In that case, if
You're
you
using-
spend author dot, you would go to the
Wait,
author
no,
one
I'm
for the uppercase.
sorry.
In this case here, you're building your substring and then doing the uppercase of that. What? Do you have any of this done?
Yes, I do. Kind of.
I don't get this. I have a question.
See, it's typing. It'll show up eventually. See, it's loading now. There it is.
Okay, so.
Oh, it's Ghost, yeah. Love it. This is why I come to class. Someone just like stored it.
They're gonna enter the name. Are they gonna do
Yeah.
that?
Wait, I'm so
Stop. I don't know what we're not allowed names for them. How do I know where to start though? Like, authors who.
Go ask Evan who say wrong.
Evan.
You're just gonna come say wrong.
Yeah.
Yes. Evan, Snake requires your assistance.
Yeah, I'm very confused.
Index cannot be resolved or.
Boy! Sarah, can you
Sarah broke my
explain
program.
the index of activity? Yeah, the index of first occurrence of whatever you send it.
Oh wait, I did not. Oh, I'm stupid. Never mind. Sarah did not break my program.
How do I?
Wow.
That is child harassment.
This how I do
Child harassment.
Oh, I got it.
Well,
I'm so good at this.
Everything up to the predicate method. I don't really understand what it's asking. What is the predicate method?
It's just, it returns a boolean if it's true or false. Then it
I'm confused again.
Huh?
What's that one method? What's that one method that like
What
goes
did you
from
say?
that?
Honestly, what did you say?
What did you say? Honestly, was talking to you.
What did you say?
Did Monty screw up more than I did? That'd be like really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
What did you say?
And I'm trying to figure this out.
It's so easy.
Okay, Horseman. Thank you for your input.
I didn't ask for
I think I'm good at it. Like, okay, do what?
Oh, it's substring. That's
Yeah,
what it
that's
is.
what I was looking
I
at.
don't remember any of the method names.
I agree. You're very smart. You're like one of the smartest people.
That is very much not true.
You're just not kidding.
Hold on.
Okay.
But you're actually
Be on the right track if I do it like this. Return.
Am I though? It's like everyone's just laughing.
No, it's not. I think you're very smart.
And then
Wait, so straight stuff.
and natural.
No.
Oh. Wait.
I can. I
So
could.
string, substring, and end index, in end index, stops at the end index, and then stop. Oh my god. Why did I put all of this in the
I
This
like.
is all hard.
Oh wait, I don't need to make a new string variable because I already have a string variable. Because that's what the beginning does.
The problems are
Wow. I'm it's
Whoa. That's a little intense.
This is math and like
I understood what you
this
said.
stats count and then this type of math. I've not called in.
Wait, what did you say?
Okay, I don't. Okay, wait, on this test, is there a class that
The play was really good.
test class?
Thank you. Who was that guy that was like the first dude?
Jonah,
Yeah, he's good.
such a legend. He's so good.
What's the string play gonna be?
Yeah.
What now?
For the hack.
Yeah.
Wait, it's three plays? One hunchback. I thought the hunchback was the winter play.
There's a musical this way will get long for
So
Don't forget the studio show.
I do the summer one because that's the only time I have time to do it.
I can do a foreman.
I almost finished the method.
Hate it. I thought, oh, is it bad that I put a game like that in online? Yeah. It's really bad.
Perfectly fine if you understand what it's doing.
But how would it be? Because like you can't do it.
I did it. You finished the method.
Oh, you can make games out of them.
How is it?
So you can make any variable. Yep.
The next one is turn the number of characters.
I don't
It's not
That's how you do it on the
This is not okay.
This is so hard.
Whacking copies.
I said it. I have a question.
If I did like index of space, would I put in two quotes?
Single.
So that's because it's only one.
Oh, under index L, you
Oh my
can.
god, it's the same thing.
Does it matter?
What
Would it matter if I did
Index L is works for either a single character.
That is mass murder. See, that I just brought up a point.
I don't care.
That is mass murder.
Now,
Here's what it's like, and then-
well, what are we going to do?
You're such a gravitate South
Mira, are you sure about that?
Oh, I'm kidding, sir.
I would rather take it out and do this.
I'm not even taking couch, but I would also rather take a couch test.
That was a joke, they dodged.
No one's gonna work for one work in a class. I don't like this. And that space in the
No, I actually would rather.
When she created
Something helped with my drink. Oh no, I need to go to the physics room and see what's mandated.
They all literally said what I said, but thought it was funny.
Evan. You know what 4th block physics said? What 4th block physics said about the test? So if they said that we could do it on Friday, I might actually have to split it. No, why?
No, you get infinite retake tests.
Okay,
That is much better.
I would rather be challenged. Evan, go.
Yeah.
No one likes you.
No, I like to hang out with
You just got banned from life. Everyone just stops.
Hold control space. Or control space. It
Do
takes so much time.
do that again.
Or control space. That didn't do anything.
I don't care, just I can't do that.
You can use like 4, you should start 4 control space. I want to see what happens. You should do it.
Wait,
I would laugh at you.
I'm confused. Okay, what did you use for hand coding?
Well, neither can the teacher.
Alright. I tried to use contains. Put it in the. I did.
Well, it should work. It's in your return.
Yay!
Oh, I don't know. Wait,
I got it. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah. Next thing, like, why?
okay.
That is, once again,
I think I did.
Authors,
I think I did. I think I did.
Look at how much code I wrote for
Like a solution.
This is the number.
Why? You can change it. First
That is
I used like all of that. Why did you put all of that in last one?
Each letter.
I mean, it's practically
This is last year's last notebook, and I did write anything. See, I wrote. Hold on, last year's last notebook, I wrote 1. Wait, no, that's like 8.
So, set.
I used the same Latin notebook for 3 years, and I have 2 pages of notes.
No. No.
Well, I mean, you do need to have the length of the person.
Just like something that's going to be on the
Like, I don't think.
in the grade book. That my mother would see. My crazy
Very cool. I'm not about to cry. That's fine.
Why would you try?
Because this is hard.
It's not that hard. Actually, it's very hard.
Mr. Osterberg, how do you do number words without
I'm not
a
supposed to swear in
Faces.
Did I mess up again?
It's like you count the numbers.
Not convert into strings. It's okay, I'll just make this a string.
Actually,
No, return
Wait,
ins.
but what about the last one?
Reverse all the return.
Oh, you know, that would also be a lot easier.
Everything but.
Good job, Sarah.
What?
Okay, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I love that.
I mean, it would work.
It would work, but.
I learned this is hard.
Guys, I'm struggling.
That's good for you, but I'm not. So.
how long was it?
Oh yeah, how much code have you written? Like one singular word?
I have up to author charts, which is, I don't know how many.
Oh my god!
I have 3 more lines
Wait,
of
we
stuff
don't need
to
to use
do.
some words.
This is so complicated.
Do I already wrote it, you just copy and paste it. Doesn't it work like a different
Sarah's copy pasted the
What? Wait, can't you just, okay, well, I like to copy
So when you get done, when you need to cut class, go ahead and test this thing out, make sure that it works.
Okay, we already did this. Yeah.
Okay, I have one. So the first page isn't even lines. Alright, so the first page has like 22 vocab words on it. It's like Unit 1 of Ecce Romani. Then page 2 has English.
So,
No, this is chapter 1 of Ecce Romani. So it has Puella. Then I have like an English essay. And then I have 9 Latin sentences. So I guess the second page isn't even notes, it's just like homework. So I got like about a page of Latin notes. For 3 years of Latin.
Okay, can you do double equals for character?
That's how I get my A in Latin.
You actually have some.
So what I do is char at the counter is equal.
I have a predicate now, is that good? I don't know if it is. Turn,
Yeah,
author,
but that's
name,
not gonna
contains
find out
X.
if it's
How do I do that?
If you know last name.
Oh wait, I
You
can
told us to
do
make
index
our,
of.
Once it hits a space.
Oh wait, but then if it doesn't work, then it's like,
Oh,
oh, I can do contained. I don't even know if that's an actual method. Yeah, that one.
Space. Like tiny single.
Okay.
Third dot, what is it? Contains. And then you do.
I don't know.
Then what is it? I actually don't know how to use that. You put in quotes or single quotes. For the whatever you do. No, doesn't get past Boolean because
I don't get it.
oh wait,
Hey, my mom works for, she does computer science.
No, she's not.
She is, that's why I
Not
go
work.
to class.
She works at the top.
I blame Sarah.
She's a drive-through.
She works at the top of the line.
My mom just.
Sarah, I know her.
She was asking so long ago.
Okay, let's see what I messed up. It's a string, it's not a character. You put string things with no quotes.
But can the entire thing turn?
I'm not going to your code.
Because you're returning it integer.
Shut up. You are bullying me.
I'm just seeing how you did.
Then again, I'm not exactly making it
Also,
false.
you say boolean without a capital B.
How did you get capital? I really don't get this.
And now that has to be boolean.
Oh.
And you have to return something, you're not even returning anything.
Whoa, calm down.
I started at
Return.
Why did you add one? Because I didn't want to start with and then I added one.
Yeah!
Mr. L.
I did it, but not really. Sarah did it.
Oh, wait. Does it start from 0?
Yeah.
A lot of times, yes. I know what you're talking about, but probably.
Wait, can I see this?
You just have to choose one thing.
What'd you mess up? Oh my god, you're fine.
Wait, what's index plus 5?
Oh, right.
Well, I can work out my plan.
I have missed the day that no one took that. Stop!
Public?
One day I missed everything.
I'm not. This is what happens when you miss school because of like.
We didn't turn out a word.
That's what happens when you're favorite.
This is why I do it over the summer.
Why you shouldn't be in the class?
That's why I do it over the summer
You didn't
because
even come and see it.
I did. I left that.
I didn't.
I left that paper stack. Because I like I got tired. And I
You
was
can
like,
go.
Okay, well, it's the first half.
Oh yeah.
It has nothing to do with the
Oh no, not doing it. Wait.
Wait,
Oh no.
Class, should I actually write a whole essay?
Yes.
know it.
No, copy and paste your English essay from.
Evan's heart rate application.
Yes. I can send that to you. I haven't saved it. Here, I'll send that to you.
Fine, I'll make it test
I saved. Okay, no, I sent it to myself. So now it's the only thing in my own chat. So you know, I made a chat with myself just so I could send stuff to myself if I needed to.
You get it right
Here, I put it in
to make sure that it works.
Google Doodle chat. What did I do? I have one more thing and I don't know how to do it. Class. Oh, I know how to do it now.
But like it doesn't like. There's no strings line. That was my goal.
Like, can you go over the reverse one?
Don't do it.
Can you go over the reverse one? Because I did it and it really worked. Like, I didn't know how. Oh yeah. I did this and it didn't work. To display it backwards.
Blame Sarah.
Oh, that's you.
That's all you gotta do. Blame Sarah. Why not? Okay.
I swear that I was like, what is that? And then I realized that
If text.chara equals Jesus.
What's a phrase?
Huzzah, magic wizard.
No, not really. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Syntax error on token char. Identifier expected. I don't even know what that means. Oh wait, I've got new. My bad.
You also said that about.
I did. I forgot to do char add.
Yeah.
Yep.
You don't think that.
Oh, the strings are. Oh, I did print it out.
How does number space in my way? Should I right now?
C equals.
That's what am I doing?
What?
How do you
Wait, how did I? Number of spaces.
I'm done.
Just do.
It took so long.
You have to see if it works.
Why not?
You know, there's no errors, so it
There
works.
should be. I'm gonna make a map on it. Tell them how many spaces there are. Okay, like.
You do that.
Okay, I tried to do it, but it's so hard.
No, yes, you could. It's literally algebra. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I already.
So then why would you do that?
If you about 4 more minutes, you gotta worry about it.
I'm already done with it.
No, but how just wants 4 years? That's go back up. Go back to your. I think that has.
At the end of this semester, I'll have more math
to
tests.
see the substring.
Because I got honors geo, I got algebra what? I got algebra 2, I got AP stats.
I have honors over 2. I took trig, but I think that's not even a valid credit.
It is.
Wait, is it? Okay, so I took trig.
Why would you take trig though? What
I was I was in middle school at Mrs. St. George was like, you should take trig. I was like, you was Mrs. St. George. It was all I had. So I didn't. That's hilarious. I don't have like older siblings or anything, and I didn't know.
Neither do I. That's the whole only time. Imagine taking trig.
At least I got like 104% in there. It was like a
Yeah, look at that GPA boost. Wow. You're skyrocketing right there.
What did you say?
You're skyrocketing.
Yeah, and actually they even changed my GPA.
Yeah, that's why it's really
It was an 85. AP trade.
Yes, AP trade. I would have asked that.
Okay,
Yeah.
shut up, okay? I didn't know
Well,
about
I would have taken AP trade.
AP trade.
Yeah, I would have taken AP trade. You know what, just to get like an AP class, we got 140.
Oh yeah, it was.
Okay, I have a question. If you get an 8 in an AP class,
Oh my god!
you get a 5
Looks like a
in
copy.
your GPA thing.
No,
That's what my mom thinks. If you get an 80 in AP, you're gonna get a
actually, use
5.
my GPA calculator. That is quite to the contrary.
Wait, does your GPA calculator work?
Yes.
Wait, I'm not the overseas never got to know that.
What do you think? I made a disadvantage GPA calculator.
I don't know. Great.
Somebody's talking about your mother. That's not
Why is it a return?
Wait,
All right.
No, I have no idea how this.
I'm going to cover our solution here just for sake of time, so get it on the video. Hopefully the video even works. We'll see what happens here. When you go ahead and we started you off with some really nice, easy methods, and then life got a little bit more difficult. So, with this, once again, we kind of have a really nice idea in that we don't have to do any data testing here, so life is pretty good. We've got our two different fields here. Don't worry about the capital P. That's just good old PowerPoint. We've got basically our default constructor. Once again, we need to make sure that we adhere to the rules that we've got. As far as the text in the essay, it can be anything that we want. But as far as the user's name and the author's name, we need first name, space, last name. So whatever you're going to go ahead and populate it with, that's fine. Yes.
Forgot to do string name sentence. And then string.
I don't want to do that because those are fields
Oh,
that I
well, you
can
did
fire
that
up above.
already. I just didn't see that.
Okay. So,
Was it like it
setting the name, not a problem. All we're going to do is we're just going to plow it in. Setting the text, no problem. All we're going to do is just plow it in. Once again, no data testing at all. Okay.
This is where.
Last name, as far as what we've got going on here, our last name is basically starting at the character after the space to the end. So I went ahead and did a substring on the name. I found the space where it was using index of, and I added 1 to it. So that means I'm going to start copying one character after the space all the way to the end of that string. Now I got it and I stored it into a local object variable, okay? I just created last. Last is not a field. It is there only for the instant that my method is running, and then I'm going to return whatever that is, the uppercase value. Now you can go ahead and start plowing these things together in terms of all of your method calls, but only do it to the point that you understand it. If this is the point of us understanding it, get the last name, got it. Now we need to uppercase it and then return it. That's better than trying to do it all together.
Can you not set that uppercase name equal to the instance field? Like, why do you have to create a whole other string called last?
That's a great question. So the question here is, why didn't I set it equal to the field name? And the reason is, I would have destroyed the field. So instead of Bob Smith, it would have just been Smith.
Oh, okay.
So that right there, that's a super important concept. I don't want to screw up that field. So I go ahead and make a copy of it somewhere else. Okay? First name, once again, we're going to go from 0 up to that space, so not so bad. And then basically we just want to return the length of that thing. So I need to get the first name and then figure out how many characters it is. Finding a letter here, in this case, I did a whole bunch of stuff together. I made my name into 2 lowercase, so it's all lowercase, and then I just asked, is the letter X inside of there? So I didn't go letter by letter in this case. We used the contains method. Once again, this programming style, I'd probably suggest at your point, dividing up things a little bit more, getting the name in lowercase letters, then going ahead and seeing if it's contained in there. But we can go ahead and add these methods together consecutively. Last one here, number of words. All I have to do is figure out how many spaces are inside of here once again, and then we can go ahead and add them all up. Trivia question. Does my code work?
No.
Ah, potatoes.
No, yeah, it doesn't work.
That
You
one
have to
works.
start with one.
Okay.
And you return it outside of
Use this to
you
what
have
that's
to add
supposed to
one
do.
more.
I'm
You
just gonna
return
say
words
no.
outside of the loop.
Because there's 2 words for every space.
Okay. So when we go ahead and we look at this here, we probably wanted to go ahead and start this off at a 1.
That's what I did.
Okay. Now there's one other issue that we got going
The
on.
loop.
What about the loop?
Like the return word should be outside.
What?
It is actually.
Forget word.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm so happy.
Oh, it's
No,
less
it's
than
not.
less than or equal.
Good, good, good. Here's our off by 1 error right here.
One more.
We cannot have it equal to the length.
What was it working?
Okay? Always has to be less
Length
than.
gives you one
And the
more.
word.
Actually, the bracket should be above return words.
Okay.
Because currently
See,
it's
every
being
time,
recorded.
like, we 0.
Mm.
And there's no bracket.
See, that's
bracket
what I was
after
saying.
and
That's what I was trying to
so there's no
Programming
statement because you didn't
No,
have the
No,
room.
you can do this statement because someone.
Oh, well, no, and then it's like the alphabet.
All right.
So.
So-
I do well.
Gentlemen. So all of these things, once again, the majority of them, you found them in all of the programs that you already just wrote. I had a lot of people copying and pasting, which turned out well, unless we didn't change names. Then we had to go back and fix. But anyhow, life should be pretty good. Looking at that sample assessment, you're going to find it's much more along the lines of what you just did, which is in line with what your assessment is going to be. Assessment is going to be write me a class definition, write me a test class to do some stuff with it.
Tomorrow, right?
Okay?
No, it's on Wednesday.
No, it's on Wednesday.
Assessment will be Wednesday.
Is there a third part?
Tomorrow, what we're going to do, no, not right now. Okay? Tomorrow, what we're going to do, we're going to cover that sample assessment first thing. So you got some time tonight to go ahead and get that done. We'll cover the solution to sample assessment first thing tomorrow, and then we are going to start talking about one-dimensional arrays of primitives. Okay? All right.